Have you ever walked into the wrong room and found exactly what you didn't know you were looking for? Michael Carson was just a struggling single dad trying to make it through one more month. He had a resume in one hand, hope in the other, and a broken past he kept carefully folded out of sight. He wasn't supposed to be in that office. She wasn't supposed to remember him. But fate has a quiet way of stepping in, especially when we think no one's watching. This is not just a love story. It's a story about kindness echoing across time, about second chances walking in through the back door of our lives. And maybe about how the smallest moment can rewrite everything. So if you believe that healing can come when we least expect it, and that sometimes getting lost is how we find what matters most, then stay with us. This one's for you. If you enjoy heartfelt stories that touch the soul, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you never miss a moment of magic. Now, let me tell you a story called The Lost Resume. Struggling single dad sat in the wrong interview. She said, "I've been waiting since 2010. Michael Carson stood in the marble lobby of the Langford building, shifting on his worn-out boots, the kind with years of grease and gravel etched into their soles. He clutched a slightly crumpled manila folder to his chest, his resume, 2 reference letters, and a printout of the job listing for a maintenance technician position. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The receptionist, a young woman in a headset chewing gum a little too loudly, barely looked up. "You're here for a 10 o'clock, yes, Carson. Michael." "Okay, take the elevator to the 11th floor conference room." "B," she said without checking the schedule. Michael hesitated. "Maintenance interview, right?" "Yep, that's where they're doing interviews today." She waved him off. As the elevator climbed, Michael adjusted his collar, trying to flatten the edge of his shirt where the iron had missed. His daughter Sophie had helped him rehearse last night. She was 19 now, just started college, and smart enough to know that her dad, after a decade of scraping by, needed a win. When the doors opened on the 11th floor, he was greeted not by a hallway filled with clipboards and folding chairs, but by thick carpet glass-walled offices and the quiet hum of money being made. The nameplate outside the conference room said Eleanor Blake, founder and CEO. Before he could step back and double-check the room number, a voice called out, "Come in." He stepped inside. The woman at the head of the polished table stood the moment she saw him. Blonde hair swept into a low bun, slate gray suit, eyes sharp yet soft like the sky before a storm. But now her expression shifted into something else entirely. She stared at him as if he were a ghost. Michael cleared his throat. I think there's been a mistake. I was told to come here for your Michael," she interrupted, her voice almost a whisper. "Michael Carson," his brows furrowed. "Yes, ma'am. I've been waiting for you since 2010. The words hung in the air, as weighty as the silence that followed. Michael blinked. "I'm sorry." She took a step forward, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. "You probably don't remember me. It was snowing. A highway outside of Bozeman, Montana. I crashed. You pulled me out." Michael's breath caught. A blur of headlights in the snow. A woman trapped in a crumpled Volvo. Her door jammed, the blood on his knuckles from breaking the window. His jacket draped over her shoulders as he turned to leave, refusing the $100 bill she tried to press into his hand. He hadn't thought of that night in years, or rather he hadn't allowed himself to. "I was on my way home," he murmured. "My wife. She was sick. Stage 4 lymphoma. I never stayed long anywhere." "I never forgot you," she said. He looked down at his folder, then back up. "I think I'm in the wrong room." She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but maybe not." She motioned toward the chair across from her. "Please sit." Something about her tone, so certain, so calm, disarmed him. He sat still, gripping the manila folder like it might vanish if he let go. "I was 25 that night," she said, "driving to a conference I was supposed to speak at. I never made it. But that night changed me. You didn't just pull me from that wreck, you disappeared before I could even say thank you. I've thought about that ever since." Michael shifted uncomfortably. It was nothing. It was everything. She paused. "After that, I quit my job at a pharmaceutical company and started over. Built this place from scratch with one belief that sometimes a stranger's kindness can save more than just a life. It can save a future." He swallowed. "I'm just here for a job. Maintenance technician. Not sure how I ended up." She reached for his resume, gently tugging the folder from his hands. Let's see what 10 years of putting your life on hold looks like on paper. He watched her eyes scan the page. There were long gaps, years where he'd been home with his wife, then raising Sophie alone. Years filled with odd jobs, janitor, part-time mechanic, school bus driver. Nothing shiny, nothing impressive, but it was all real. When she looked up, her eyes were glistening. You were never in the wrong room, Michael. He sat very still. I have a proposal, she said, sliding the resume aside. We're launching a new mobile health unit bringing care to underserved areas. We need someone who understands how things work, who can fix anything, who doesn't mind long hours and unpredictable terrain. Why me? He asked, cautious. Because I've built an empire on the belief that people like you, quiet, steady, selfless, are the real miracle. You saved me once. Maybe now I can return the favor. The clock on the wall ticked audibly. Michael's hands, calloused and rough, rested on the table's polished surface. I'd need time to think, he said finally. Of course. She stood. But I meant what I said. I've been waiting since 2010, not just to thank you, but to find out what happens when two paths that should have never crossed finally do again. As he left the room, resume still lying on her table, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a second chapter. The autumn air bit into Michael's neck as he stepped out of the Langford building. He didn't zip up his coat. He hardly noticed the wind at all. He walked 3 blocks without direction, down past a bookstore he couldn't afford, to browse a cafe that once sold the cheapest cup of black coffee in town, until rent hikes wiped even that comfort away. His boots scraped against the sidewalk, and with every step a part of him tried to make sense of what had just happened. He hadn't been in the wrong room. Not really. Somehow he'd walked into a moment that had been building for 15 years. He stopped at a park bench just outside the transit station and sat down. His palms still felt the smoothness of the table in Eleanor Blake's conference room. Her voice echoed in his mind. You pulled me out. I've thought about that ever since. Michael leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fingers knitted tight. The memory was clear now, so sharp it stung. It had been Christmas Eve 2010. Sophie was 4. His wife Jennifer was in the hospital, her immune system too weak for chemo. Her face drawn but still smiling whenever he came through the door. He had been driving back from a last-minute job, fixing a busted generator at a rest stop up north. Snow had started falling hard, and there she was, a silver sedan off the road, one wheel in a ditch, driver's door crumpled inward. The front windshield spiderwebbed from the inside. He hadn't thought. He'd pulled over, grabbed the crowbar from the trunk, shattered the window. She was conscious, shaken, bleeding from a small cut on her forehead. Please don't leave, she'd whispered. He remembered the panic in her eyes, her hands trembling as she reached out. He'd taken off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, told her the ambulance was coming, and then without giving her his name, he'd vanished into the storm. Back then it hadn't felt heroic. It felt necessary. He looked down now at his weathered hands. These were the hands that had built cribs, carried grocery bags 2 at a time, held back tears at a hospice bedside. The hands that had fixed hundreds of broken things, though never truly his own life. And yet, Eleanor remembered. Not just the moment, but the man. It was surreal. People didn't remember kindness like that. Not for 15 years. Not enough to build a company around it. He rubbed his chin and laughed quietly. What the hell just happened? By the time Michael got home, the sun was dipping behind the hills. His apartment was a modest second-floor unit above a laundromat. The rent was low, but the plumbing sang every time someone used the sink downstairs. He stepped inside, shrugged off his coat, and was immediately greeted by the smell of mac and cheese and a voice from the kitchen. Hey, Dad, you're early. Sophie poked her head out, her curly brown hair tied up in a messy bun. She was still in her hoodie from the university. She grinned. How'd it go? Michael hesitated, then smiled. It was unexpected. Uh-oh. She carried 2 bowls into the living room, setting them on the small table in front of the worn-out couch. You didn't walk into a janitor closet again, did you? Nope. This time I walked into the CEO's office. Her eyes widened. Wait, what? Michael told her everything, well, most of it. He left out the way Eleanor had looked at him, the way her voice cracked when she said she'd been waiting since 2010. That part felt too big to explain. She offered me a different job, he said finally. Some kind of mobile health unit gig. I think I'd be fixing equipment on the road. She said she started the company because of something that happened when we met. I didn't even know who she was. Sophie leaned back, stunned. Dad, this sounds like something out of a movie. He chuckled. Yeah, the kind where the old guy gets a second chance. Not old, she corrected. Experienced. He shook his head. I haven't said yes. Why not? Michael stared at the wall for a moment, the chipped paint, the photo of Jennifer still sitting on the side table next to Sophie's high school graduation frame. Because I don't know if I'm the guy she thinks I am. Sophie softened. She reached out and touched his arm. You're more than she thinks you are. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, broken only by the sound of the neighbor's television through the floorboards. After dinner, Sophie stood and started clearing plates. You should call her tomorrow, she said, even if it's just to say thank you. Michael nodded, his gaze distant. Yeah, I think I will. That night after Sophie went to bed, Michael pulled out a box from the back of his closet. Inside was a collection of letters, some written to Jennifer in her last months, others written to no one. Among them, folded and fragile, was a piece of lined paper yellowed at the edges. To the woman I pulled from the snow. He hadn't known her name then. He'd written it on Christmas Day 2010, sitting in a hospital waiting room, watching over Jennifer's sleeping form. He never mailed it. He didn't know where to send it. He unfolded it now, rereading words written by a man who still believed the world might offer something back. By the final line, he realized something. This letter wasn't an echo from the past anymore. It was a bridge. Tomorrow he would call her, and maybe for once he wouldn't walk away before someone had a chance to say, stay. Michael stood outside Eleanor Blake's office once again, his heart ticking faster than the old wall clock beside the receptionist's desk. He'd called that morning. She'd picked up on the second ring and simply said, come by at noon. I'll be waiting. Now it was noon, and she was. The receptionist nodded him through, and this time there was no confusion. No mix-up, no wrong room. Just a second chance standing behind a glass door with his name already on her calendar. When he stepped in, Eleanor looked up from a sleek laptop and smiled, genuine, not polite. It was a small thing, but after years of transactional smiles from strangers, it caught him off guard. Michael. She stood gesturing to the same seat as yesterday. I didn't think you'd come. He offered a shy smile and sat. I almost didn't. Then I found something, last night, a letter I wrote back in 2010. To you. Her eyes flickered with something unspoken. You wrote me a letter, never sent it. I didn't know who you were. Didn't even know your name, just needed to get the words out. I was scared that night, not of the snow, but of what was waiting for me at home. Eleanor didn't press him. She waited the way people do when they truly want to listen. My wife was dying, he continued. I didn't have time to stop, but I couldn't drive past you. I still remember your voice when you said, please don't leave. You weren't just stuck, you were alone. Eleanor leaned forward. And now you are? He nodded, not completely. I've got Sophie, my daughter. She's in college. Smart kid. Stronger than me, probably, but it's been a long road. She studied him quietly, then turned her laptop screen toward him. On it was a slide deck with a heading that read Community Mobile Health Initiative Pilot Launch Proposal. Below was a map with rural areas in Washington marked with red pins. Beneath that, a bulleted list. On-site health screenings, equipment transport and maintenance, technician required for mobile support. This is the job I want you to consider, she said. It's not glamorous, it's long hours. You'll be driving across counties, you'll be crawling under vans and checking machines most people don't even notice. But it matters. Michael scanned the page. I don't have a fancy degree or any recent training. I've been out of the system for too long. I'm not hiring a resume, she replied. I'm hiring a man who's been fixing lives quietly while the rest of us were chasing titles. He glanced back at her. Why are you really offering me this? Eleanor didn't look away. Because 15 years ago you saved someone who had no one. And instead of letting that memory collect dust in my mind, I built something that could honor it. But I can't keep building without someone like you beside me. Someone who remembers what it's like to show up without being asked. He looked down at his hands still rough from years of work, nails trimmed but perpetually stained. Do I get a uniform? He asked, a slow smile forming. Eleanor grinned. We'll get you 3. And a coffee stipend. Michael laughed softly. It was the kind of laugh that had been buried beneath debt and grief and too many years of quiet struggle. I haven't had anyone believe in me in a long time, he said. I'm not the first, she answered gently. Just maybe the first in a while. Later that afternoon, Michael walked through the garage in the rear wing of the building. A man in his 30s wearing grease-streaked overalls approached with a clipboard and a skeptical expression. You the new guy, he asked. Michael offered a firm handshake. Name's Michael Carson. Joe. Fleet lead. Joe looked him up and down. You sure this gig's for you? It's not a desk job. You're gonna get dirty. Long drives, heavy lifting. Michael shrugged. That's how I know it's honest. Joe cracked a grin. All right then, let me show you the rig. He led Michael to a tall, gleaming van parked at the bay's edge. It looked more like a mini clinic than a delivery vehicle. Logos on the side read, One Care on the Go. Every piece of this needs regular maintenance, Joe explained. Power inverters, refrigeration for vaccines, water sanitizers, diagnostic kiosks. This thing's more temperamental than my ex-wife's cat. Michael smiled as he stepped inside, running his fingers along the paneling, noting the wiring, the mounts, the portable generator tucked into the rear compartment. This is good work, he said almost to himself. Real work. Joe watched him for a moment, then nodded approvingly. You'll fit in. By the time Michael returned to the main office to fill out onboarding paperwork, the sun was low. He was leaving the building when he noticed Eleanor standing alone at the window, looking down at the street. He hesitated, then tapped gently on the glass. She turned. How was the van like a spaceship with a stethoscope? She chuckled. You ready for this? Michael thought about it, about Sophie's hopeful face, about Jennifer's laugh, about the years of patching tires and souls, both his and others. I think I finally am. Eleanor stepped closer. The glass door between them opened with a soft click. You ever wonder, she asked, how many lives change just because someone takes the wrong turn? Michael met her gaze steady. Maybe there aren't wrong turns, just turns we don't see coming. And in that quiet hallway, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Not of who they were, but who they could become if only they kept walking forward. Michael's first official day on the job began just after dawn, when Seattle was still wrapped in a cool, silvery mist and the city hadn't quite stirred. He stood beside the One Care van in the company's back lot, his breath visible in the autumn air, holding a checklist clipboard and a steaming cup of black coffee from a vending machine that had seen better days. There was something oddly peaceful about it, this early morning silence. The hum of the generator as it warmed up the promise of doing something that mattered. He moved with a quiet confidence, checking cables, inspecting seals, testing battery levels. His hands knew what to do. Tools were where they should be. He may have been out of practice in a clinical setting, but fixing things that had never left him. Still beneath the comfort of the work, a familiar weight pressed on him. The past. It traveled with him in every ragged pocket of his jacket. In the photo of Sophie in his wallet, grinning in her cap and gown. In the monthly stack of envelopes marked past due. And now in the back of his mind, a new uncertainty bloomed. This job, this opportunity, it felt too good, too sudden, like a gust of wind strong enough to knock you off your feet. Michael had learned long ago to brace for the fall. Later that morning, Eleanor joined him outside the loading bay. She wasn't in a suit this time, but jeans, boots, and a lightweight jacket, clipboard tucked under her arm. She looked less like a CEO and more like someone who belonged in the field. Michael raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect you out here. Eleanor smiled. I like seeing what we're building beyond spreadsheets and funding rounds. She peered into the van, her fingers trailing lightly along the mounted oxygen tanks and portable diagnostic screens. Most people never see this side of healthcare. The side that travels back roads and gravel driveways. The side that says, we're coming to you even if no one else will. Michael nodded. You ever go out in the field? I used to. In the early days, I drove our first mobile unit myself. We didn't even have working heat. He laughed. Sounds like a proper startup. I burned my fingers trying to rewire a coffee machine into a battery backup. We called it Operation Caffeine or Die. Michael's laugh lingered warm and real. He hadn't laughed like that in months. As the conversation settled into silence, Eleanor turned to him. You've got something the world needs more of, Michael. Not just skill, integrity. People feel safe around someone who fixes things without being asked to. He didn't know how to respond. He'd spent years being invisible. Useful maybe, but not seen. Now he was being looked at like he mattered. It both humbled and unsettled him. At lunch, Michael sat alone at a corner table in the break room, chewing through a peanut butter sandwich and checking the repair log on his phone. Joe passed by, gave him a nod, and muttered something about a faulty thermostat in Unit C. Michael had just made a mental note to check it when he noticed Eleanor walking by the open door, then pausing. She stepped in holding 2 coffees. "You look like someone who doesn't take enough breaks." He smiled. Didn't know those were allowed. She handed him a cup and sat across from him. "Mind if I ask something personal? Depends how personal. You ever think about going back to school? Getting recertified, maybe moving into management?" Michael nearly choked on his sip. "Me and management?" She shrugged. "Why not?" He shook his head, chuckling softly. "That part of my life ended a long time ago. My wife got sick and I just let everything else go. I figured I could always find work." But now he gestured vaguely, meaning everything: the age in his hands, the debt, the years lost. "I don't think I'm meant for climbing ladders anymore." Eleanor looked at him carefully. "Maybe not the traditional ones, but maybe you're meant to build new ones for people who've never had one." The words hit deeper than she probably knew. He looked away toward the window. "I'm just trying to make it through the month without borrowing from Sophie's tuition fund." She didn't flinch. Didn't pity him, just listen. "I lost my wife with nothing but 2 months of health coverage left," he continued. "The bills didn't stop when she died, and I didn't ask for help. I just kept going. Because that's what you do when you've got a kid counting on you." Eleanor's voice was soft. "And now who's taking care of you?" He blinked at her. The question, simple, sincere, unraveled something in his chest. That evening, as Michael was locking up the van, he saw Eleanor standing in the office again, just like that first day. Only this time her reflection in the glass seemed heavier, thoughtful. He stepped inside. "You all right?" She nodded. "Just thinking." Michael glanced around. Her office was immaculate. Awards on the wall, a crystal vase with white tulips. But no photos, no clutter, no sign of personal life. "You ever take time for yourself?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow. "This coming from the man who eats peanut butter every day and sleeps 4 hours a night?" He smirked. "Touché." A beat passed, then another. "I used to think if I worked hard enough," Eleanor said quietly, "I'd stop feeling like I was making up for something." Michael tilted his head. "What do you mean?" She gave him a sad smile. "That night in the snow, I wasn't just scared because I crashed. I was scared because no one would have noticed if I hadn't made it home." Michael said nothing, because he knew the feeling. They stood there, not speaking, not moving, 2 people shaped by grief, held up by responsibility, now standing in the quiet possibility of something more. Maybe not yet love, but a recognition, a promise, a slow unfolding hope. The first frost of the season had dusted the edges of the sidewalks in a thin shimmer by the time Michael pulled into the clinic lot the next morning. The mobile unit waited for him like a faithful dog, gleaming ready. He unlocked the rear doors and got to work checking vitals on the refrigeration unit and recalibrating the glucose monitors they'd be taking to the outreach site that day. But his mind wasn't on diagnostics. It had been weeks since he started the job, and yet Eleanor Blake still made his pulse do strange things. They hadn't spoken much since that quiet evening in her office, but something had shifted. Not romantic, not yet, just open. He wasn't sure what to do with that openness. So when she appeared in the garage that morning, coffee in one hand, scarf tossed loosely around her neck, he straightened as if caught slacking. "I promise I'm not stalking you," she said with a smile. "Just thought we could grab breakfast before the drive." Michael blinked. I'm riding along today. It's a small clinic, but I like to be hands-on with new sites. You sure you're ready for 3 hours of potholes and country roads? I survived a snowstorm in Montana, remember?" She quipped. He laughed, but something about the memory softened his smile. That night, that snow, that wide-eyed woman with blood trickling from her temple, shivering as he wrapped his coat around her. He'd never told anyone about how scared he was then, not even Jennifer. They stopped at a roadside diner an hour out of the city. It was the kind of place that smelled like bacon history and burnt coffee, vinyl booths, condensation on the windows. Michael slid into a corner booth and ordered a black coffee and scrambled eggs. Eleanor asked for tea and steel-cut oats, which made him grin. What she asked? Nothing. Just, you don't strike me as an oatmeal person. I'm full of surprises, she said. They ate in a comfortable rhythm, two people used to solitude discovering the ease of quiet company. Then she set down her spoon and leaned back. Mind if I ask something a little personal? Michael raised a brow. We've already bonded over snow and engine trouble. How much more personal can it get? She smiled. You said your wife passed. Jennifer Wright. He nodded, eyes dropping to his plate. 8 years ago, but it still feels like yesterday sometimes. Eleanor hesitated, then asked, what was she like? The question disarmed him. Most people avoided saying her name like it might break him. But Eleanor asked gently, curiously, like someone who didn't pity the grief but honored it. She was fierce, he said quietly. Tiny thing, but she didn't back down from anyone. She used to argue with insurance reps like a trial lawyer. She loved sunflowers. And she'd sing off key just to make Sophie laugh. His voice caught just slightly. I stayed home after the diagnosis. Took odd jobs where I could. I don't regret a second of it, but I lost the rest of me in the process. I stopped being more than a dad or a husband. I forgot I was allowed to want anything for myself. Eleanor's gaze didn't waver. You gave her dignity. That matters. Michael met her eyes. And you, anyone ever stay? Her smile dimmed. Almost. Once. I was engaged briefly. It ended when he made it clear I'd have to choose between him and the company. You chose the company. She looked down at her tea. No. I chose the version of myself I hadn't finished building yet. He couldn't see it, but I could. Michael let that sit for a moment. Then he said, I think we both got very good at being strong alone. Maybe too good, she agreed softly. The outreach clinic was in a converted church basement 40 miles outside the city. Eleanor worked alongside the staff, answering questions, calming nerves, and at one point holding a toddler while his mother received a flu shot. Michael, meanwhile, crouched beside a stubborn monitor, hands smudged with ink and dust, coaxing the unit back to life. When the day ended and the sun dipped into the fields, they loaded the van and drove back in near silence. Not uncomfortable, just full. Like they'd both said something big without needing to say much at all. Back in the city, Eleanor walked with him to the employee lot. You did good today, she said. You make it easy. She looked at him. Not a glance, an observation. You know, when I was younger, I used to believe success was about being the first in and last to leave. Impressing people. Winning. And now I think it's about leaving people better than you found them. Michael nodded. You found me under a busted engine in the snow. She laughed. And you didn't even let me thank you. You just did, he said, then added almost shyly, and I think maybe I'm finally ready to be found again. A pause, their eyes locked. There were no promises, no sweeping declarations, but something passed between them, a mutual understanding, quiet and rare, a beginning. As Michael drove home that night, he turned off the radio and rolled down the window. The cold didn't bother him. He'd spent so long surviving. It felt strange now to start living. And somewhere between the yellow lines and the quiet streets, he allowed himself to wonder, what if love didn't have to be loud to be real? Sometimes it only had to arrive again. The morning sun crept in slowly through the blinds of Michael's modest apartment, slanting across the faded wood floor and landing on a cardboard box labeled Old Papers. He hadn't opened it in years, but something Eleanor had said during their outreach drive still lingered in his mind. You didn't even let me thank you. He'd spent the past few days replaying the drive, their conversation at the diner, and the easy rhythm of working beside her. It wasn't just her kindness or elegance, it was the way she saw him. Not just as a technician or a widower, but as a man still capable of becoming. So that morning before his shift, he pulled the box out from beneath his bed, sat on the edge, and slowly opened the flaps. Receipts, old car manuals, a stack of Sophie's elementary school drawings, and then tucked between a manila envelope and an outdated phone bill, he found it. A single folded sheet of lined notebook paper. The ink was smudged in places, the fold lines deep from age, but the words were intact. To the woman I pulled from the snow. You probably don't remember me. That's okay. I don't need you to. I just need to write this to get it out. You were scared and I didn't know what to say, so I just did what felt right. I didn't stay long because someone else was waiting for me. My wife. She's sick, very sick, and I needed to be home. But for those few minutes, it felt like the world paused, like strangers could still mean something. You said, please don't leave. I didn't want to. But some people are always walking away from something. I hope you got home safe. I hope someone came for you. M. He read it twice, then 3 times. He hadn't realized how much of himself he had sealed away in those words. The loneliness, the guilt, the way he'd never allowed himself to wonder who that woman became. Now he knew, and the woman she became had built a life out of that moment. He folded the letter again, this time gently, and slipped it into his coat pocket. Later that day, he knocked softly on Eleanor's office door. She was standing by the window reading something on her tablet, but she looked up and smiled when she saw him. I was just about to call you, she said. Joe tells me the refrigeration unit in Van B needs a full overhaul. Think you're up for the challenge? He walked in, closing the door behind him. Yeah, but I came by for something else. She tilted her head. Everything all right? Michael reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the folded letter. I wrote this the day after I pulled you out of the snow. I never sent it. Didn't even know who to send it to. She looked at it like it was a rare artifact, something precious and unexpectedly sacred. Can I read it? She asked, her voice quiet. He nodded and stepped back, letting her have the moment. She unfolded the paper slowly, her fingers running over the creases, and began to read. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty. It was thick with history, with emotion, with 2 versions of the past colliding gently into the present. When she finished, she didn't speak right away. She folded the letter back along its original lines and held it to her chest. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to, Michael said. I just needed you to know that night meant something to me too. I didn't forget. I couldn't. Her eyes glistened. I was so lost that year. Not just that night, but in everything. Career, family, I was running so fast I didn't even know what from. And then there you were, calm, quiet, kind. You didn't even ask my name. I didn't need it, he said. Kindness doesn't always need a name. They stood in silence for a beat. Then she walked over, gently placed the letter on her desk, and looked up at him. You know, I kept thinking if I ever found you again, I'd be this composed, impressive woman with a grand speech ready. Michael smiled. You are impressive, but I'm okay skipping the speech. Her laughter was soft and warm. Good, because I don't think I can say anything more meaningful than what you wrote 15 years ago. That afternoon, Michael returned to the van and got to work replacing the compressor on Unit B. Joe came by to help him lift the heavy panel, and for a while they worked in quiet sync. But inside, something had changed. It wasn't just the job or the van or the paycheck that kept him here. It was the feeling that for the first time in a long time, his story hadn't ended. It had paused, and now it was continuing. That evening, as he walked through the parking lot, he saw Eleanor standing at the edge of the sidewalk, arms crossed, coat wrapped tightly against the wind. Hey, he said, catching her eye. You waiting for someone? She turned, smiling. I was waiting for you, actually. He paused. Is something wrong? No, she said, stepping closer. Everything's finally beginning to feel right. She reached into her own pocket and pulled out a small frame, a delicate wood border surrounding a photo of the mobile unit with the words, "One life can change," another printed beneath it. I had this made for the outreach office, she said, but I think I'd like you to hang it there. You were the beginning, Michael. You were the moment I stopped thinking the world was just cold and dark. He accepted the frame, gently touched by the weight of what it symbolized. Neither of them said it, but something in their eyes spoke it clearly. I see you. I remember you. And I'm here now. And that somehow was enough. For now. The Monday after Thanksgiving arrived gray and wet, the kind of Seattle morning where the rain wasn't falling so much as it was floating in every direction, soaking everything indiscriminately. Michael pulled into the parking lot behind the OneCare building just before 7. The lights in the garage were already on, casting a dim yellow hue over the vans. He liked arriving early. The quiet, the rhythm, the solitude before the hum of voices and tasks filled the day. But this morning felt different. He couldn't place it, just a weight in the air like pressure before a storm. He was halfway through checking the defibrillator calibration when Joe came into the bay jaw, tight holding a file. Hey, Joe, said Clipped. Michael looked up. Morning. Something wrong? Joe didn't answer at first. He handed Michael the file. You signed off on this equipment clearance last Friday, right? Michael took it and flipped through the pages. It was a service record for Unit C's vaccine refrigeration system. He remembered the job clearly. It had been running hot and he'd done a full flush and recalibration. Yeah. Why? Joe crossed his arms. Unit C failed mid-route yesterday. Vials were exposed to ambient temp for over 3 hours. Several $1,000s worth of vaccines compromised. Michael's chest tightened. That doesn't make sense. I double-checked everything. Well, something went wrong. And the log shows your sign-off. Michael stood silent for a moment, the weight of the accusation settling in his gut. I'd never cut corners on something like that, he said finally. Joe exhaled through his nose. I know, but protocol says we pause field work for you until we can investigate. You're on hold. Joe, it's not personal, man. You know how liability works. Legal's already flagged it. Michael nodded slowly. Okay, but it didn't feel okay. Eleanor didn't speak to him until late afternoon. She found him sitting in the back of the break room alone, nursing a mug of lukewarm coffee that had long lost its purpose. I just heard, she said. Michael looked up, and for the first time in weeks, his smile didn't reach his eyes. Apparently, I broke the freezer. And the trust. She sat across from him, folding her hands on the table. I don't believe it. He raised an eyebrow. You don't think I made a mistake? No, she said firmly. I've seen how you work. The way you check everything twice. The way you talk to equipment like it's alive. You're not reckless. Then someone's lying, he said, or covering their own tracks. Eleanor leaned back thoughtful. Do you remember who logged the report after your sign-off? Michael thought. There was a junior tech shadowing me, Derek. He asked a lot of questions, but I figured he was just eager. Eleanor's expression darkened slightly. Derek's been trying to position himself for a supervisory role. He's ambitious, nothing wrong with that, but lately he's been pressing. Michael didn't respond. He didn't want to believe that someone had intentionally sabotaged him. But he also knew the sting of being disposable, of being the easy one to blame. That night, Eleanor stayed late at the office. The building emptied out, the hum of fax machines and printers replaced by the low hum of the city beyond the rain-streaked windows. She sat at her desk with 2 files open, Michael's incident log and the building's internal security access reports. After 20 minutes of cross-checking timestamps, her eyes caught something. Derek's ID swipe came after Michael had completed the job, at 6:13 p.m., long after Michael had clocked out. Eleanor sat back, fingers steepled under her chin. Sabotage. Intentional or not, someone had altered the work after Michael signed off. And now he was suspended, his name under review, his reputation hanging by a thread. She didn't hesitate. She called HR and scheduled an emergency review. Then she drafted a memo clearing Michael's name, attaching the evidence, and forwarded it directly to the board. But she didn't stop there. The next morning, Michael arrived to find Eleanor waiting by the garage entrance, holding 2 coffees. He raised an eyebrow. Truce offering, redemption offering, she said. You're reinstated. Effective immediately, he blinked. What happened? She handed him a printed report. Derek accessed the system after you'd logged out. There's a digital footprint. He's been suspended pending formal investigation. Michael's breath left him slowly. I knew it didn't feel right, he muttered. Eleanor stepped closer. I'm sorry I didn't protect you faster. Michael shook his head. You protected the truth. That's enough. They stood quietly in the morning fog, the soft rumble of city life waking around them. I don't know what I would have done if I lost this, he said. This job. This second chance. You never lost it, Eleanor said gently. We just had to fight for it. Michael looked at her, and for the first time saw not the CEO or the woman from the snowstorm, but the woman who had built something out of gratitude and now out of trust. Maybe storms didn't always bring destruction. Maybe sometimes they cleared the path for something better. The office buzzed with quiet tension the morning Derek's suspension was made official. Conversations dropped to whispers when Michael walked by, not out of malice but uncertainty. He wasn't the kind of man who invited gossip, just the kind who had finally stopped being invisible. And now everyone noticed. Joe caught up with him outside the loading dock, clapping a firm hand on his shoulder. You all right? Michael offered a thin smile. Yeah, better today. Joe exhaled. I owe you an apology. I should have trusted you from the start. Michael shrugged. You followed protocol. I get it. Joe nodded, but guilt lingered in his eyes. Still, not easy when the good guys get burned. Michael didn't answer, but his silence said enough. Inside the garage, the one-car van awaited freshly serviced and humming low. It was strange how something mechanical could feel like home. After weeks of learning its quirks, how the diagnostic screen flickered in the cold, how the rear axle pulled slightly left, it had become more than just a vehicle. It was purpose. And purpose for a man like Michael was oxygen. Later that morning, Eleanor called a staff meeting. The entire mobile unit team gathered in the community conference room, about 24 employees from drivers to nurses to outreach specialists. Michael stood near the back, arms crossed loosely. He wasn't sure what to expect. Eleanor stepped up to the front, composed as ever, but there was a subtle fire in her eyes. "I know recent events have left a few of you unsettled," she began. "There's been speculation, confusion, and unfortunately some damage to the trust that holds our team together." She glanced briefly at Michael, then continued. "We investigated thoroughly and found clear evidence of unauthorized log entries by one employee. That individual has been placed on administrative leave, pending further review. But I want to speak to something larger than just one incident." She let the room settle. Integrity isn't optional here. It isn't a line item in your job description. It's the foundation of everything we do. Our patients don't choose us because we're flashy or fast. They choose us because we're real, because we care, because we show up. A pause. Michael Carson didn't just show up in 2010 when he pulled a stranger out of a snowstorm. He showed up every day since, without fanfare, without ego, without asking to be seen. Now the room turned toward Michael. He didn't shift, didn't blush, but his jaw tightened, his gaze lowering slightly. "He exemplifies the kind of quiet leadership we need more of in this world," Eleanor said. "And if any of you have forgotten what that looks like, let this be your reminder." The room broke into soft applause, nothing roaring, just steady, respectful. But for a man like Michael, it was enough to undo years of being invisible. That afternoon, Michael returned to his van to find a small envelope taped to the driver's side mirror. No name, just a handwritten note inside. "You probably don't know me, but I watched how you handled everything. Quiet, honest, like a man who knows storms and keeps walking anyway. Thank you for showing me how to do that. See." He folded the note carefully and placed it in the glove box next to Sophie's photo. As the week went on, things returned to rhythm: repairs, outreach trips, winter prep. But underneath the daily flow, something new had settled: a deeper respect from his team and a clearer sense that this place was no longer temporary. One afternoon, Eleanor caught him in the hallway. She wore a navy wool coat, her hair pulled back, and a loose braid clipboard under one arm. "Got a minute?" "Always," he said. She led him to the rooftop terrace, a place few employees used, but one Eleanor apparently valued for its view and silence. From up here, the city unfolded beneath them, in soft grays and muted reds. "I come up here when I need to remind myself why I do this," she said, leaning on the railing. "Not the business part, the human part." Michael stood beside her, the wind pulling gently at his collar. "I used to think building a company would fill something in me," she said. "And in some ways it did. But success? It's not a finish line. It's just a tool. And lately I've been asking myself what kind of life I want when the building stops." Michael glanced at her, surprised by the confession. "I think," she continued, "the hardest thing isn't surviving. It's letting someone else walk beside you when you no longer have to." He took that in slowly. "You think maybe that's the next storm?" She smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe it's the sun breaking through." They stood there a long time, saying nothing, not needing to. Later that night, Michael sat at home on the couch, his old flannel blanket draped over his legs, Sophie's voice chiming through the phone on speaker. "Wait, they actually clapped for you, like real applause?" "Don't make it weird," he grinned. "I'm just saying, you are a big deal now. CEO speeches and everything." "Should I start calling you Sir Carson?" Michael laughed. "Please don't." Then Sophie's voice softened. "I'm proud of you, Dad." His throat tightened. "Thanks, kid." They talked for a few more minutes before saying goodnight, and when he hung up, Michael leaned back and let the silence fill the room. Not the kind of silence that came from emptiness. The kind that came after a chapter had been closed and a new one was waiting to begin. The first snowfall of the season came quietly overnight, blanketing the streets of Seattle in a delicate hush. By morning, the city was slower, gentler, as if softened by the weightless white. For Michael, it was the kind of day that brought everything back, memories of that blizzard in Montana, of the silence in a hospital room, of goodbyes he hadn't been ready to say. But this morning he wasn't lost in grief. He was standing at the kitchen counter, fixing breakfast, humming softly. Sophie had come home for the weekend, a rare visit between exams. She shuffled into the kitchen in fuzzy socks and an oversized sweatshirt, blinking at the snow like it had personally offended her. "Is that legal before December?" she asked, reaching for a mug. Michael chuckled. "You've been in dorm housing too long. You forgot how to enjoy winter." "I enjoy it from behind glass," she said, sipping coffee. "Not on sidewalks where I fall on my face." He slid a plate of toast toward her. "You're home now. No slipping allowed." They ate in comfortable silence, the way people do when they know each other's rhythms too well to need small talk. Then Sophie set her cup down and reached into her backpack. "Actually, I brought something." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Homework, no." She pulled out a small hand-addressed envelope. "It's for Eleanor." He blinked. "Eleanor." Sophie nodded. "I've been thinking about her a lot, about how much you've changed since this job, how you laugh more, how you walk straighter, how you talk about your day like it matters." Michael stared at the envelope. His name wasn't on it, but the weight of it settled into his chest. "I just wanted her to know," Sophie said, "that whatever she did, whatever she saw in you, it's working. You're not surviving anymore, Dad. You're living." Michael swallowed. "You sure you want me to give it to her?" Sophie smirked. "You're not 12. I'm not passing notes in homeroom. But yeah, I think she'd want to know the impact she's having." That afternoon, Michael stood outside Eleanor's office, the letter in hand. The glass door was open and she was on the phone, her voice low and professional. He waited until she hung up, then knocked softly. "Hey," he said, stepping in. She looked up, her expression lighting in that quiet way he was learning to recognize, like a lamp dimming warmer when you entered a room. "Come in." He held out the envelope. "From Sophie. She asked me to give it to you." Eleanor raised her eyebrows, surprised, and took it gently. "Is everything all right?" Michael nodded. "She just wanted you to know what this job has meant. For me, for us." Eleanor turned the envelope over in her hands but didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she looked at him. Really looked. "You've changed, Michael, and not just because of the work." He shifted his weight. "I didn't know I needed changing until I walked into the wrong room." She smiled softly. "You didn't walk into the wrong room. You walked into the one where someone had been waiting to see you for 15 years. He sat across from her. "You think it's crazy that one moment, one snowstorm could lead to all this?" "No," she said. "I think it's fate, or grace, or whatever name people give the things they don't expect but desperately need." They sat in silence for a beat. Then Eleanor opened the letter. Sophie's handwriting was careful, almost shy. She read it aloud, voice steady. "Dear Eleanor, I don't know you well, but I feel like I do. Because since you came into my dad's life, I've seen him become someone brighter. I've seen the way he looks forward instead of behind. He used to come home tired in a way sleep didn't fix. Now he comes home thoughtful, sometimes even humming. He talks about your company like it's more than a job, like it's a cause, like it's hope. You gave him something no one else has since my mom died. You reminded him that he still matters. Thank you for seeing him. Sophie Carson." When she finished, Eleanor folded the letter carefully and placed it in her drawer. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She just nodded like someone who had received something sacred. "That may be the most meaningful letter I've ever received," she said. Michael looked at her, his voice quiet. "She meant every word. I know." Another silence. Not awkward, just full. Then Eleanor asked, "Would you join me for dinner tonight?" Michael blinked. "As in..." She smiled. "Not a meeting. Not an outreach strategy session. Just dinner. Just us." He hesitated, but not out of doubt, only surprise. "I'd like that." They met that evening at a small Italian restaurant tucked into a side street near the harbor. No press. No reservation under a corporate name. Just two people who had spent years holding their lives together, finally giving themselves permission to let someone in. Over pasta and soft candlelight, they talked about the things that hadn't come up in meetings or van checklists, favorite childhood books, music from their 20s, what scared them about turning 40. Michael told her about the night Jennifer passed, how the nurse had quietly slipped out of the room to let him grieve. Eleanor told him about her father who died before she graduated college, and how she'd once driven all night just to leave a flower on his grave and whisper, "I made it." By dessert, there were no walls left between them, only bridges. And as they stepped outside, breath fogging in the cold, Eleanor reached for his hand. Not as a signal, not for show, but because she could. And Michael didn't pull away. The storm had long since passed, and the road ahead, however uncertain, no longer felt like it had to be walked alone. The December sky pressed low over Seattle, thick with the kind of gray that swallowed sound. Rain swept across the city in steady, unrelenting sheets, the kind of rain that didn't bother apologizing, the kind that asked you to remember. Michael stood beneath the awning outside his apartment building, coat, zipped keys clenched in his hand. But he wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. He stared out at the street, remembering another storm 15 years ago. Remembering a woman trapped in a car and the look in her eyes when she whispered, "Please don't leave." He didn't know why this day stirred it all up again. Maybe because things were quiet now, almost too quiet. He'd returned to work, had dinner with Eleanor, even laughed more in the last week than he had in years. But underneath it all ran something unfamiliar and frightening hope. And hope, he'd learned, was its own kind of storm. Across town, Eleanor stood at her window watching the rain trace lines down the glass like fragile veins. Her office was warm, soft jazz humming from her speaker, a mug of tea gone cold on the corner of her desk. But she couldn't focus. Not on the reports, not on the emails, only on what she hadn't said. Michael had changed things quietly, deeply, not just the way she saw her company, but the way she saw herself. For years, she'd built walls out of ambition and routines, telling herself purpose was enough. But now she knew purpose was only half the story. Connection was the rest. And connection required courage. She grabbed her coat. Michael was crouched beside the boiler in the building's basement. His landlord had asked him to check a noise. And even though it wasn't technically his job, he couldn't help himself. Old habits. He heard the footsteps behind him just as he tightened the last valve. "Thought I'd find you near something broken," Eleanor said. Michael turned startled and smiled. She was soaked at the edges, rain clinging to the strands of her hair, her cheeks flushed from cold. She looked like she'd walked through the entire city just to find him. "Eleanor," he said, wiping his hands. "What are you?" I needed to say something, she interrupted. And I didn't want to wait until tomorrow, or email it, or pretend it wasn't real. He stood slowly. The pipes hissed behind them. The air smelled of rust and damp concrete. "I know what this started as," she said. "A job, a memory, a second chance for both of us to rewrite something we thought was lost. But somewhere along the way it became more, at least for me." Michael didn't speak. Not yet. She stepped closer. "I don't want to just be the woman you once saved, or the boss who offered you a new role. I want to be someone who chooses you here now. Not because I owe you gratitude, but because I see who you are. And I want more time to know what that means." Rain pounded on the pavement above. Michael let out a breath. A long one. "I've been waiting to hear that," he said. Eleanor's eyes shimmered. "Then why do you look so surprised?" "Because I wasn't sure if I could believe it. For a long time I've lived like the best parts of my life already happened, that anything left was just surviving." He stepped forward. "But you walked into the rain to find me, and maybe that means it's okay to believe there's something more waiting." They stood close now, the sound of water echoing around them, the heat from the boiler pulsing against the cold. Then, without fanfare or hesitation, Michael reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small and carefully folded. It was the letter, the one he had written 15 years ago. He handed it to her again, not as an artifact this time, but as a gift. She looked at him puzzled. "I had it laminated," he said, smiling gently. "I don't want it lost again, not like before." Eleanor held the letter like it was made of glass. "You kept this all these years." "I did, but I was waiting for the right person to give it to." She looked up, her voice quiet. "You already did." There beneath a basement light bulb and the low groan of old pipes, Eleanor leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't dramatic or desperate. It wasn't rushed or unsure. It was calm, grounded, like a promise. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "Come back with me." Michael smiled, brushing a damp curl from her face. "Anywhere you want to go." They walked out into the storm side by side, no umbrella between them. The rain soaked through their coats, clung to their eyelashes, dampened their shoes. But neither of them seemed to mind. Sometimes the rain didn't mean trouble. Sometimes it just meant you were finally moving towards something that mattered. And this time, neither of them walked alone. The weeks that followed unfolded with the quiet steadiness of something real, something no longer trying to prove itself. Michael and Eleanor didn't rush into labels, didn't stage grand declarations. They simply continued showing up, working side by side, sharing coffee during morning checklists, and trading ideas during long outreach drives. And yet beneath the routine, something unmistakable had shifted. It was in the way Eleanor leaned just slightly closer when they stood in front of the whiteboard in strategy meetings, the way Michael's eyes lingered a beat longer when she smiled over a cup of chai, the way silence between them had become a kind of language, trusting unforced deep. One evening in the small back conference room, where ideas usually lived on sticky notes and spreadsheets, Eleanor rolled out a large architectural rendering across the table. Michael raised a brow. "We're building something new." She nodded, her eyes lit with quiet excitement. A second mobile hub, more clinics, more reach. But not just vans this time. A satellite station equipped with long-term storage diagnostics training rooms for volunteers. "We've been getting more federal grant interest and the timing feels right." Michael studied the plans. "You're not thinking small." "I stopped thinking small the night I almost died in the snow," she said, her tone half playful, half reverent. "Since then, I've learned that the people most in need don't live near glossy hospitals. They're miles off the highway where buses don't run and clinics don't stay." Michael traced a finger along the layout. "Who's heading this project?" Eleanor looked up, her eyes soft but certain. "You." He froze. "Me? You understand the heart of this work," she said. "Not just the mechanics, the purpose, the people. You've lived it." He stepped back, stunned. "I'm not a project manager. I've never handled budgets or permits or any of this. You know what makes people feel safe, what equipment they trust, what systems hold up when things break down. That's more valuable than any degree on my wall." Michael shook his head slowly. "You really believe I can do this?" She stepped around the table until they stood shoulder to shoulder. "I don't just believe it, I need you to." The next day, Michael stood before the staff clipboard and hand-rolled plans under one arm. He wasn't used to being at the front of the room, but he carried himself with quiet authority. "We're not building something shiny to show off," he said plainly. "We're building something strong enough to keep promises, and I'll need every one of you to help me do it." People nodded. Some even smiled. Respect, he realized, wasn't asked for. It was earned and returned. The work began almost immediately. Late nights at the planning table, mornings spent on calls with city contractors. Eleanor handled the politics and grant negotiations. Michael handled the logistics and the people. It was a rhythm they fell into easily, like two gears built for the same machine. And every night when the office lights dimmed and the city quieted, they found themselves walking out together. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. One night as they left the building beneath a clear winter sky, Eleanor glanced over. "Did I tell you Sophie emailed me?" Michael turned surprised. "No, you didn't." "She thanked me again. Told me she's transferring Major's Public Health Administration. Said she wants to be part of something that heals the world the way this place healed her father." Michael felt a tightness in his throat he didn't expect. "She didn't tell me. She said she wanted it to be a surprise." He laughed softly. "That kid, she sees you, Michael, so clearly. And that clarity, it's changing lives." They walked a little farther. Then Eleanor paused. "Can I ask you something?" He stopped. "Of course. If you could go back to the night we met in that storm, would you still stop?" He looked at her, the memory flashing behind his eyes. The broken windshield, the freezing air, the way she had trembled beneath his jacket. "I think about it all the time," he admitted. "And I always come to the same answer: I wouldn't change a thing. Not the timing, not the fear, not even the loss. Because that night taught me something I didn't know I needed: how to show up. And now, I get to show up every day. For this. For you." Eleanor stepped closer, her breath fogging in the cold. "I've spent so many years building this company to repay that moment, to live up to the second chance I got. But I never thought I'd get another one. With someone. You do, Michael said quietly. We both do. Weeks later, the first wall went up on the new site. Michael stood on the construction lot in a hard hat and safety vest, clipboard in hand, watching workers pour concrete beneath a pale blue sky. Eleanor arrived mid-morning holding 2 coffees. She passed one to him without a word. They stood shoulder to shoulder watching the frame take shape. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Michael took a sip, then smiled. "I'm thinking maybe this isn't just a building," he said. "Maybe it's a home. For what's coming next." She looked at him. "For us," he turned to her. "If you want it to be." Her answer didn't come in words, just a soft smile, and the quiet brush of her fingers finding his. Hand in hand they stood as the walls rose behind them, and the future finally began to feel like something they weren't just repairing, but building, together. The ribbon fluttered in the cold morning breeze, stretched taut across 2 white pillars at the entrance of OneCare's new community health hub. A small crowd gathered, staff, city officials, volunteers, neighbors bundled in coats and scarves, holding cups of steaming cider handed out by smiling interns. Michael stood off to the side just beyond the podium, adjusting his collar for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. He wasn't used to spotlights or speeches or being introduced with titles like Director of Field Operations. He missed the simplicity of socket wrenches and circuit diagrams. But when he looked over and saw Eleanor smiling at him, elegant in her dark wool coat, her hand lightly resting on the folder of her speech, his nerves settled. He still didn't like the spotlight, but he wasn't standing in it alone. Eleanor stepped to the microphone. Her voice, warm and clear, carried through the crisp morning. 10 years ago, I stood at the side of a road thinking no one was coming. But someone did. And they didn't just pull me from a car. They reminded me that kindness is the most powerful kind of rescue. She paused, eyes soft as they flicked toward Michael. I built OneCare to honor that moment. But in doing so, I found people who continue to teach me what healing really means. Not just in medicine, but in how we choose to show up for one another. She gestured toward the new building behind her. The bright blue OneCare emblem shimmered on the wall above the glass doors. This space isn't just walls and equipment. It's a promise to serve, to connect, to reach the people who've gone too long without being seen. And one man in particular helped make it possible. Michael stiffened as she turned toward him. Michael Carson is more than a colleague. He's proof that life can be rewritten. That loss doesn't end a story, it deepens it. That showing up quietly and consistently can build something extraordinary. Applause filled the air and Eleanor nodded toward him. Michael, would you do the honors? He approached the ribbon, slowly, scissors in hand, his throat tight. The crowd leaned in, expecting some words. So he spoke. When I first came to OneCare, I was just looking for a job. What I found was a reason to believe again, in work, in people, in what comes after the worst part of your life. He looked out over the group, strangers, friends, co-workers, who had become something closer to family. This building may have been drawn on blueprints, but it was built with faith. Faith that second chances exist, that no matter how far you've fallen, there's always a hand reaching back. He cut the ribbon. The doors opened, and the future began. Inside, the space gleamed. Natural wood warm lights, rooms named after donors and patients. One hallway was called the Sophie Wing, complete with a framed quote from Eleanor's letter. Hope looks like someone who won't walk away. Sophie stood nearby, snapping photos for the OneCare newsletter. She beamed when her father passed. Didn't faint during the speech. I'm impressed, she whispered, hugging him. He smiled. Came close. Later that afternoon, after the crowd thinned and the cleanup crews packed away the chairs, Michael found himself in the main lobby alone. He walked to the far wall where Eleanor had requested a special frame be mounted. Inside it, preserved behind glass, was a folded sheet of paper. The letter, the one he'd written after the snowstorm. A small plaque below it read, "The Lost Resume." A life changed by a moment of kindness. He stared at it for a long while. Not because he didn't remember what it said. He did, every word. But because now it no longer felt like a memory. It felt like a beginning. That evening, he and Eleanor sat on the rooftop terrace, the skyline bathed in the deep blue of dusk. The city shimmered beneath them, lights flickering like stars that refused to quit. Eleanor poured them each a small glass of wine. To what we built, she said. Michael clinked his glass to hers. To what we're still building. A soft wind passed. Somewhere below, the hum of the new hub pulsed with life nurses, clocking in patients, registering heaters, humming in examination rooms. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you ever miss the life you had before? Michael thought for a moment. I miss the people. Jennifer. The years with Sophie when she was small. But the life itself? No, I was surviving. Now, I'm not just living, I'm part of something. With someone. Eleanor turned her face toward him. You once said you forgot it was okay to want something for yourself. What do you want now, Michael? He didn't hesitate. This. Then after a moment, you. She took his hand, threading her fingers through his, and whispered, Then stay. I will, he said. This time I will. The stars came out slowly, not in bursts but in quiet certainties like everything good in life. And beneath them, two people who had once been strangers in a snowstorm now sat wrapped in something stronger than weather, stronger than fate. They sat wrapped in choice. And for the first time in a long time, both believed in what came next. Because love didn't always come loud. Sometimes it arrived as a knock on the wrong door and stayed. Where are you watching from today? We'd love to know which part of the world you call home. Share it with us in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far kindness and storytelling can reach. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that second chances do exist, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story waiting to be told. And most of all, thank you for spending your time with us today. Your presence here means more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and keep believing in the quiet miracles.